All right, we are back. The squad is back. Happy to be back. Been looking forward to this for quite a while. Took a little bit of a break. Some new faces on board here. So first off, everybody, welcome back to the Triden Group kind of cybersecurity squad. Happy to get the show going again. Want to introduce a new face, a new kind of caricature you're going to see on the logos here to the group. Mr. John Carruthers joining us here. He's recently new to Triden Group, but definitely not new to the industry, and his experience is pretty awesome. Just got done doing a really cool interview that we released with him on a kind of a multi-part series we're doing. So John, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Derek. Thank you. It's a nice welcome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Hey, Sammy.
Sammy, welcome to you.
Good morning, guys.
Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. And it's nice to have you on board, John. Welcome to the Security Squad.
So guys, it's October. Do you know what that means?
I do.
Besides pumpkin spice coming and ghosts and Halloween, we have our favorite time of year. Yes.
PSLs and
a different type of term.
Month. Yeah.
That's right. Everyone's favorite time of year, where the users get bombarded with thousands of training emails out there.
Yes.
That's right.
So John, why don't you kind of walk us through a little bit more about Awareness Month, what we're doing, and why we're here?
100%. Thanks, Derek. Yeah. I think the fact that we have, to all of our points, it is CSAM, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The fact that we have a month dedicated to this is a great thing, especially for those of us that practice the craft of security. It's great, but it's also somewhat interesting. I think it's great because the people piece of that people, process, and technology is getting the attention that it deserves. Fantastic. But it's interesting. When I was in the FBI, I would get asked every September. I would start getting calls from industry. Hey, can you come talk to our company next month?
Sure.
For Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And I would do it, and I was always happy to do it. But I would always leave with, this can't be the only month.
Yeah.
Right. This is a year. It needs to be Cybersecurity Awareness Year. So maybe we can, as Triden Group, we can try.
I like this.
That. Yeah, we'll implement that change. But yeah, so back to Triden Group, we're so hyper focused. One thing I love about us is that we really are here to help industry, right? In the space of cybersecurity, because that's what we do. And the fact that that's what we do, and this is the month that it is. This is a great podcast to welcome the squad back, and happy to be a part of that. So what we do is align, for those that are, I know that we're all familiar with it, but Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. What is that? CISA?
CISA.
Take a guess. Awesome. Our favorite CISA.
Yes. Awesome government
bingo.
Agency. Yes, they are charged with helping industry protect itself from the never-ending supply of bad guys on the cyber from the cyber side. And so
they
do
good work out there.
Yeah, they do. They do a lot of really good awareness work, and so this is their month, right? And they every year they come out with a theme, and this year's theme for Cybersecurity Awareness Month in CISA is "See Yourself in Cyber," which is great. We all
I love that one.
And Triden Group has taken that theme and added a little extra flavor, and that is "Secure Me Now." Right? We think back to the T-Mobile guy. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Secure me now. So that's us. And I think the first topic, guys, is going to be multi-factor authentication.
That's right.
That's right. Absolutely.
This podcast topic. So let's get on it.
Something near and dear. I know, Sammy, you want to kind of walk us through, MFA, what is it? What are your kind of thoughts on it? And we'll kick it off.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on what John was saying, what a critical month it is, because technology, as we know, has changed so much over the past however many years. But the one attack vector that seems to persist is the human element, right? We're seeing that in attacks in 2022 on large, Fortune 50 organizations still to this day. So it's incredible that even after all this time, it's how relevant and important it is to ensure we remain on top of our awareness. So definitely, thank you for that intro there, John. And piggybacking into, or moving on into MFA, one of our favorite topics here at Triden Group as we continue to help roll this out to all of our clients and even new employees like that join the fray. So, but in the world of credential stuffing these days, which you've probably heard once or twice on the news at this point, MFA is kind of our great defense against the dark arts, if you will. And while not perfect, and we could talk about what some of those flaws are, MFA is an authentication method that requires the user to provide 2 or more factors of verification. So that way they could gain access to different services, applications, online accounts, VPNs, so these things. And of course, the big element here, right? That second letter there, the F, right? The factor. It's really composed of providing a second factor, whether that be knowledge of something, a possession of something, or something that you are. And so when combined with the legacy method of authentication, which is passwords, this can really provide some defense against brute forcing, credential stuffing, unauthorized access to different accounts.
Yep. What's that saying? It's something you have, something you know, something you are, right? So it could be like also like a thumbprint or a retina scan and more advanced scenarios you might get into and things like that. So it's something other than a knowledge of a potential easy to guess password or breakable password and things like that. So,
and I think our colleague Robert, right, uses one of the better analogies that I've heard, because it's so simple when we talk about ATM cards, right? So we got the ATM card and we got the PIN code. If you don't have both, you're not getting your money.
Yep.
Yeah, something you have and something you know.
Exactly. So 2-factor authentication, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, that's a good one right there.
Yeah.
And they definitely go hand in hand, right? You want to have the password plus the MFA, not just one or the other, and you kind of have to have both living together. Let me ask you this: like, do you guys think 2 is enough, or does it get into like tri-FA or 3FA, things like that?
Like dual person authorization, right?
I mean, 2 is better than none.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, is it enough? I don't know. I mean, it might not be for some environments, but it's better than nothing. Kind of as I've joined Triden, one of my charters is to kind of build out virtual CISO, right? And so we're doing a lot of executive advisory work, and to really kind of put security in layman's terms for executives. And one thing that I always say, you cannot be the path of least resistance for the bad guy.
Right.
You just can't. And we walk into environments, unfortunately, more than we would like to see, where there is no multi-factor.
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable, right? I mean, because that needs to be the very first security control to be implemented. If you're dealing with a green space on the security side, I would say that, I mean, and we're going to hit a lot of the controls this month, for the month, but the very first thing has to be MFA.
Yeah, I think too, like when you go in and you kind of start talking to like your cyber insurance, that's one of the first things they're going to ask you. Like, do you have it? If not, why not? And usually it's like, okay, you have 50 days to put it in, or we're going to cancel your policy.
Yeah, and if you don't have it, you're not getting insured.
Not
exactly.
I think it's gotten to that point, right? So
yeah, we've seen that with our customer base and those that have been lacking. It's now they're getting actually their ransomware and other insurances denied and just not renewed because they've been behind the times a little bit on content and things like that. So it's definitely relevant. I think from my perspective too, MFA is more mainstream, maybe is the word I would use, because now it's like, like most banks use it when you enroll, they say, hey, give me at least your phone number for a text message. And social media content providers are kind of doing this stuff out there, so it's becoming less about the corporate side and more just general cybersecurity, which is great. I mean, it should be everywhere in my opinion. So
that's interesting too, because there's, in some environments it's a mandate, right? Like in banking.
Yep.
But in others it's an option, like Gmail.
Yep.
And I think
it's recommended but not required.
It's recommended,
right?
Exactly. And I think we're seeing that shift where I think the option or the recommendation is going to be less that and more mandated kind of as we move forward. So I think we're getting close to that tipping point.
kind of moving away from supporting and moving towards enforcing, right? And I think that's one thing that organizations get confused is just because you support MFA technology doesn't mean it's being implemented properly. And to circle back to what Derek said earlier about, is it better to have more factors? Honestly, I think the quality of the second factor is probably more important than saying having a third factor, right?
Yeah.
And so,
because that's a good point. Because like you can have 50 questions about somebody, or like one really good other factor. Like, what are you going to choose? Like, well, I'm going to pick the really good factor because I can probably, like if I know someone for 20 plus years, I can probably guess all their questions they might use because I know their dogs and where they lived and that kind of thing. And I kind of joke with this, like one of my long-term childhood friends I've known for, forever. And we kind of joke saying we can probably answer each other's questions about each other because we know everything about each other, kind of a thing. So to your point, having that really good factor is more important sometimes. So good stuff.
Yeah. Well, to that point.
Oh, go for
it. I'm sorry, Sammy. Yeah, I was going to ask both of you. To that point, as far as the quality of that second factor, what do you think about SMS? Because that's been kind of hitting the news lately, right? It's kind of
I'll let Sammy offer his guidance first, and I'll give you my 2 cents.
Sammy.
Yeah, it's funny because in my notes here, I literally, it's as to why you shouldn't use SMS MFA is like one of the top points here, right? And I just, there are a lot of ways it can be abused. And when we go back to our point about quality, there are just some clearly other more reliable factors that we can use. And today, right, with things like poured out scams or SIM swapping, attackers can easily gain access to MFA messages and use them to authenticate to target applications or services. If you get your phone stolen and they're able to use the SIM on another device, or are able to call up T-Mobile impersonating you and then able to port your phone out to another carrier, these types of things happen. And then as a result, now they have access to those SMS messages, which are allowing them authentication to various environments. So I think actually I read a statistic that the FBI received 1,611 SIM swapping complaints in 2021 compared to about 320 total from 2018 to 2020. So
it's a big number.
100% on the right. Yeah, I don't know what the percent there is, but it's quite a lot.
And it's crazy. It's crazy that it's a real thing too, because it's, you kind of touched on it, Sammy, with the T-Mobile example. I mean, it's a social engineering act, right? It's somebody at the phone company getting socially engineered into swapping your information to another phone.
Absolutely.
And so here we are, right?
Then you have the other side of it too, where you have criminal organizations going to T-Mobile employees and saying, "Hey, I'll pay you $100 a swap."
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
Like we've seen that issue too. So that's a whole other level of
and I think we talked about phishing, right? And there's some parts of the world where $100 is you're not gonna be able to fight against that. So
and we talked a lot about the stuff on like the whole like fake warrant search or the at-risk people and things like that. So to answer your question, SMS is it better than nothing? Yes. Is it the best? Far from it, right?
Yeah.
So
perfectly
certainly better than using a reused password that's available on the internet and having no MFA, right? But I think to you guys' point, we may even start to see insurers require different or certain types of second factors for different industries, depending on the criticality or the risk of the industry. One thing I think we're going to probably see a lot more of is the use of the FIDO protocol or PKI-based MFA, and in which we're really relying more on biometrics and hardware encryption to really provide us with the second factor. That way, even if somebody is able to gain access to the SMS-based authentication, how easy will it be for them to gain access to your biometrics? And now there is still something to be said. I say this all with a grain of salt because I'm thinking about Uber right now, and how even with a stronger or more solid second factor through things like MFA fatigue or exhaustion attacks, even still these systems are not 100% perfect, right? And so in the case of Uber, we saw that using credential stuffing, they were able to gain access to the initial user's credentials. And from there, they just kept hitting them with push messages, push notifications until eventually they reached out on WhatsApp and let them know, hey, we're from IT, again, social engineering, and eventually they just accepted. So even in a case where it's asking you to provide biometrics, if it's being kind of coerced, through repeated attempts, there's still a potential vector there. So it's incredible to think that, as important as these systems are, they're not 100% perfect. But
that kind of goes back. Yeah, that goes back, Sammy, when I said that, it needs to be the first security control implemented, but it can't be the only.
Absolutely.
Right? Totally agree.
Absolutely.
And that kind of speaks to that whole defense in depth methodology that I'm sure, no doubt, have already gotten into and we'll get into again in the future. But yeah. Hey, Sammy, I was going to ask you a question around, one of the things about Triden Group is the talent, assembled here. And so, Sammy, you're, an off the charts pen tester, right? Your hats go from gray to gray, and it's impressive. So, how do you get excited when you go into a customer or a client environment to do a pen test and you see no MFA, or do you get sad?
I guess it depends which hat I'm wearing and who I'm talking to, right? Because if I'm talking to the chums, right? If I'm talking to the comrades and we're talking about our great hacking stories, it's it's always the path of least resistance is what the packer is always going to take, right? Low hanging fruit. That's the whole purpose of running repeat pen test engagements, is to really identify in this limited amount of time that we have, what are the lowest hanging fruit, and let's go after those. So certainly from that perspective, it's nice to see. But the same note, when I do see it enabled, it could certainly stump me. And so from a business risk and a strategic perspective, I'm very happy to see that organizations are implementing this properly and are making my life harder, at least when it comes to compromising systems through credentials or through gathered credentials. I actually do tend to see every day that more and more systems do actually have MFA. It wasn't very long ago that most O365 instances didn't have any MFA on them. Odds are, if you got access to email credentials, you could just log right in. Nowadays, we're starting to see location-oriented whitelisting and blacklisting alongside the MFA. So even if you've compromised MFA, you now have the location issue to kind of deal with. So to your point, if I'm wearing my proverbial black hat, then I'm a little sad. But if this is a business engagement, I'm certainly giving them their commendation where it's due.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that one. And that's a good point, Sammy. Is now we're getting into like more, call it behavioral, contextual awareness with MFA.
Oh yeah.
Not just like challenging with the token, but hey, Derek logged in from California and then 30 seconds later he's trying to log in from New York. Like the math doesn't math there, right? So there's some impossible travel and scenarios that look different. Like his browsing behavior is different. Like it's a different type of device. Like maybe I'm a Mac user and all of a sudden it's an Android logging in or a Linux box or things like that. So it's kind of like enhancing. It's almost like an MFA plus. There's probably no term yet. We can maybe coin that one, or like a small E MFA, enhanced MFA. I don't know. We'll come up with some cool branding there. These are kind of things we're getting into. And to your point, it's not just like one. It's like one plus some intelligence behind it. So it's good stuff.
I just think that MFA and IAM, Identity and Access Management, will one day be inextricably linked. And I think we're already kind of starting to see that even if you have these systems in place, like I go back to the Uber example, because they didn't have any kind of granular access management policies, that person was pretty much able to get the entire keys to the kingdom. So I do feel that these SSO providers and MFA are, we're already kind of starting to see this happen, but will one day kind of be synonymous. You won't be able to have one without the other, at least when you're talking about best practices. So, when we talk about defense in depth, to your point, I think it's definitely going to be something that these systems and these platforms will kind of integrate as one system. So where you're kind of administering the, where people have permissions to go, as well as the different factors that they are allowed to be they're allowed to have in use. So yeah, very, very great point there, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
So there's one thing I want to add. I think with the last few, let's say, mainstream breaches we've seen in the news, we don't go into detail on all those, but it wasn't necessarily a problem with the MFA protocol, or the implementation, or MFA itself. It was a issue with abusing and basically spamming everybody to just click the button and get annoyed and say, yeah, I'm done with this. So again, it comes back to that user behavior acceptance and what they're doing, and things like that. And like one thing I always kind of like remember, and this is something I think Sammy, I talk about a lot, is from a threat actor perspective, there's no such concept of like, well, it wasn't in scope, everything's fair game, right? So keep that in mind. They're going to use every little weird trick. If you think it doesn't make sense, they're going to abuse it, right? So you're doing your training, doing your annual pen testing, or hopefully more than annual, you're doing it monthly, quarterly. You keep these things in mind and start thinking outside the box and testing your users for these different types of new behaviors and tactics out there. So good stuff.
That is
Absolutely.
Really good.
Awesome.
Yeah, MFA fatigue is what I've learned is the phrase that we're coining for this type of attack, or MFA exhaustion attack. So
yeah,
it's actually kind of
it's a real thing.
Yeah,
I like this, John. Yeah.
So we've
EE.
EMFAE. Enhanced
Plus.
MFA exhaustion.
There we go.
I like this.
We've coined that. We've also come up with Cybersecurity Awareness Year. So
I love it.
We've solved a
I
lot
like
of
that.
problems.
We have our work cut out for us.
10 minutes. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Anything else you kind of want to close out with for MFA? For our viewers out there, any kind of tips they can take home today, or were there options for their business out there?
Enable it. Do it.
Absolutely.
Force it.
Simple as that. That's like the best thing I can say too. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen. We'll kind of pause here for a little bit, and then we've got some more content coming your way here soon, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. Take care out there, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
See
you all.
next time, guys.
Have a good one.